Our objective is to put out a good product so that you can be proud, and we represent Des Moines, and we represent who you are as people and what Iowa is.
This is the Hometown Hoops Podcast with Drake Men's Basketball and your host, Michael Admire.
All right, it is the Hometown Hoops Podcast. My name is Michael Admire here on the Drake Sports Media Podcast Network, and we are powered up by Learfield. You know, we stream these podcasts and episodes through the Drake Athletics YouTube and Facebook pages, and you can also listen wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Varsity Network app from Learfield. All right, coming up, we dive into the Drake Northern Iowa matchup coming up this Sunday. We talk all things Dogs, Panthers, and broadcasting with Kevin Lehman. That conversation coming up shortly. But first, this Sunday, Drake will head to Northern Iowa with first place on the line. But it's not the only time these in-state rivalries have played with trophies on the mind. In fact, just last year, the Bulldogs were in a tie atop the Valley standings with Indiana State with 3 games to play. They go up to the McLeod Center and fall short. The Bulldogs end up finishing 1 game behind Indiana State. Go back to 2022. The Panthers come into the Knapp Center on the final weekend of the regular season, and they clinch a championship on the Bulldogs' home floor. Then we can go back to 2008. It was the Bulldogs clinching their long-awaited Missouri Valley Conference title at the McLeod Center. Those games were big. Fans remember those like they were yesterday, but none have been like this. This is the latest in the regular season that the Bulldogs and Panthers have played while being 1 and 2 in the Missouri Valley Conference standings. Drake wins. They claim at least a share of their 9th Missouri Valley Conference regular season title. Northern Iowa wins. The Panthers move into a tie for first place with only 2 games to play. This isn't just for in-state bragging rights. This is for rings and trophies, and this is where legends in a rivalry are made. All right, no better way to set the stage than welcoming in Kevin Lehman, who will be on the ESPN 2 call this coming Sunday. He's an Iowa native. He covers all things Missouri Valley Conference, but he's from our state. He's an Iowa native, and he follows these 2 programs as close as anyone. So let's jump into that conversation right now. All right, we are joined now by Kevin Lehman. Got his master's degree from Drake. He's kind of Iowa connections through and through. Iowa native, master's degree from Drake. Was an assistant coach for a long time at Northern Iowa. Kevin, man, you are like the busiest guy in MVC show business. What you got going on these days?
Well, I'm down in the dungeon here on this Friday afternoon. So Clay Mavick and I have Murray State at Drake Saturday. I believe that's a 5:00 tip. So we're going to come out of there hot out of Peoria, and we're back at UNI for that big Drake matchup on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. But we'll be up 8:00, as you know, Michael, is the Drake shoot around. So we won't be working on much sleep, but we've gotten used to that.
You guys have had a crazy schedule. So it's Murray State at Bradley, right?
At Bradley, I might say the wrong
You said
term
Drake.
there.
You said Drake.
Yeah, I got Drake heavy on the mind right now.
I know you've had a lot of our games. You and Clay have had a ton of our games this year. I want to get into the matchup coming up this Sunday. Drake, Northern Iowa for first place. I want to talk about even like how you prepare for a game like this. But I want to start off with letting you share a little bit of your basketball background, because it's unique this year. We actually have a lot of new viewers and listeners because of just naturally with a bunch of new guys and a new coaching staff. And we've got some folks that have tuned in from Northwest Missouri State. So a little bit of your background in the sport and your coaching career, and I'll let you drop the bio.
Well, I'll stop a little bit back. I'll go backwards. I've been doing I think I've been doing the Valley now for actually the first game I did was 2008. Adam Emenecker's team up at the McLeod Center, and they won that game to cinch the title for that conference championship. And Rob Brooks night is the first game I called in the Valley. So that's 2008. So this would be your number 16 in the Valley. I actually have been broadcasting. I tell people, Michael, I'm a retired basketball coach who is now broadcasting. And as my girlfriend Madonna says, don't complain about the travel because they're paying you to eat ice cream every weekend.
I know the travel and all that stuff is a grind. And, we experience it a little bit too, as the radio broadcasters with the team, but it's hard to complain too much. Cause when you tell somebody else like, oh yeah, I was at this game last night, then I'm at this game tonight. And they're like, yeah, forget you. is the response you usually get.
Well, as you know, Michael, they just don't beam us in there either. You got a lot of travel and a lot of preparation time, but back in my background. So when I got out of coaching, actually, I'll give you a bit of my coaching background. So, I'm an Iowa City native, Regina High School guy, got my big break coached at Dowling High School, and I was finishing up my master's at Drake. So that's my connection to Drake. I have a master's degree from Drake. And I tell people I got most famous by teaching Caitlin Clark's mother history at Dowling High School. So I know that Ann Clark and Ann Nizzy Clark knows her presidents really well. But after that, Michael, I went up to, I was assistant with Elder Miller at Northern Iowa for 10 years. And on the staff, when we first inherited, our players were Nick Nurse, who's now the head coach of the 76ers, and Greg McDermott, who's now the coach at Creighton. So I left there shortly after Bob Bowlesby left to become the AD at Iowa. I left Northern Iowa and was the head basketball coach at Omaha for a number of years. And then exited broadcasting. And I got my coaching, but I got my big break when Greg McDermott took the job at Iowa State. We had been close throughout the years, and I always tell people I have a winning record against Greg McDermott in his days at Wayne State and at North Dakota State when I was the head coach at Omaha. And he always comes back with that. He's got a good comeback for that one. I won't tell you about it. He asked me to come do the TV for the Cyclone Network at Iowa State. So that's how I got my foot in the door with broadcasting, led the ESPN work in the Big 12. And then, as I said, I did that first Valley game, Adam Emenecker's team, Bucky Cox and those guys up at Northern Iowa. And I believe it was the game that cinched them the conference championship.
Yeah, it was. It was the game that they actually clinched a share of the conference championship in that game. So a similar situation this week. And I was doing some preparation when it comes to how many times these teams have played 1 versus 2 this late in the season. And the one that really popped off was that 2008 game where Drake was at the McLeod Center, had a chance to win at least a share. Drake goes on to win the regular season conference championship outright. And that was the last time the Bulldogs won the conference championship outright. So you've been in the business. You've been in the basketball business basically all of your life, coaching, and then into the broadcast side, which is far less stressful. That's
what I tell people. When the game's over, like that Bradley win over Drake last Sunday, you just, as a broadcaster, you can just walk out of there. As a coach, it just drives you crazy about different decisions you could make that in the game to help win the game. But hey, I want to welcome all those fans from Northwest Missouri State. I mean, this is they're finding out that Drake is a great institution, fantastic basketball program. I'm also tied to Drake too because Darren DeVries, I recruited him at Northern Iowa, coached him for a couple of years before I left for Omaha. So we've always been close. But I think they got a great coach here, and Coach Mack coming in from Northwest Missouri State, and obviously because this team is really rocking and rolling.
Well, let's just go with right there. You're one of the guys that within the ESPN world, you come and spend some time at Drake practices in the middle of the summer. You're always at media days, which I really appreciate. You do your homework, and that's what it takes to be a good broadcaster. You got to know these teams inside and out. So when you're in the gym this summer and you're seeing Coach Mack and Coach DeVries, you know what this program has done over the last 6 years. You see Coach Mack walk in here. What are you seeing and hearing in those first couple of practices that really jumped out to you?
Well, I think he takes a different approach to the way he teaches the game. It's a lot about concepts. And I think I heard you allude to it last week or last broadcast you may have had, that when you go to a shoot around at Drake on game day, most teams have a scout team that runs the other team's patterns. Drake doesn't do that. And I talked with Jesse Shaw, the recruiting coordinator. We were at Murray State. I said, you guys have ever practiced against their sets? They don't. It's all about teaching concepts and applying those concepts to what the team's doing. So it's a very unique approach and a very successful approach. I think one of the things that we don't talk enough about Drake is how good they are defensively. Lead the league in steals. That usually what turns a game for them, their ability to get some steals and runouts. And Coach Mack talks about those little intricacies at that shoot around, how we can get a steal here, a wrap around here. We're going to go rake the ball on this drive. I think his ability to communicate to his players on that type of level and their study of personnel is outstanding. The way they understand the tendencies, the strengths and weaknesses of their personnel, and take advantage of that when it comes game time. Because as you know, Michael covered this, a lot of times there's slippage and what you teach doesn't carry over to game time. I think what Coach Mack does with Drake, there's very little slippage in what he teaches, and their ability to absorb that transfers right into the game situations.
So when you're in the middle of the summer, seeing what's happening, you're going to media days, you're watching all these shoot-arounds throughout the year, and then, you see the product on the floor. What has been the thing that has jumped out to you most about this historic run, really, that Drake is on now, 24-3 as we sit here today on this Friday afternoon? What's something that's kind of spun your head and like that's why they're doing what they're doing?
Well, I had heard about Bennett Sturtz, and the preseason polls, I voted him second team. And here's the reason why I go around so much in the summer and the fall, because of the transfer portal now, Michael. There's so many new players transferring these programs, especially at the mid-major level, because they're getting poached by the higher level teams, that to get a handle on what these players look like, a feel for what they're trying to do. And this year with 5 new coaches, I thought it was really important that I would get out and see as many teams as I could. And I'm self-employed. I'm actually have a number of rental properties and real estate development, I would say. So I'm kind of on my own schedule as long as I don't get calls from tenants, which happens when it's 10 below degrees. You deal with those types of situations. But so I have a somewhat flexible schedule. It's really helped me immensely in this broadcast career. But I think I forgot your original question there.
No, it was just kind of like what did you see in the practices in the middle of summer that led you to believe that they could do what they're doing this year at 24-3?
The fact, Michael, that he brought those players with him from Northwest Missouri State, Mitch Muscari, Abreu, etc., Howard, and
Sturtz and Isaiah Jackson, all those guys.
Jackson, but they're older guys. Sturtz I know is a junior, but the other guys are 5th-year guys. Mascari's a 6-year guy. I think the fact that they understood his program and how he teaches and the terminology really helped with the new guys like Manuel and Banks to transition into this program, because now you got players teaching players, and that's huge. And we know the old is always successful in the Valley. The older you can get, the more experience that you can have, the more success you'll have in the Valley. So I saw that right away with this Drake team. I said, these are some older guys. They're mature, not only physically, but psychologically, emotionally, mentally. And that's a huge advantage at any level I think you compete in sports. So that caught my attention right away. And then the way that they're teaching their concepts. And the more I talked to Coach Mack about his offense and their defense, it was very evident that his approach is different from the traditional coaches. The fact that it's all about concept base and reads and reactions at the offensive end, which makes it really difficult to defend and to prepare for.
Well, and today, I'm sure you saw the news. He is a finalist, Coach Mack is, for the Warner Ladder Naismith Men's College Coach of the Year, down to 15. There are a couple mid-major guys on that list. But it's who's who of college basketball. Probably at this point, now that we're now in February, probably didn't see this back in June and July, but now that we're in February, it's probably doesn't come as much of a surprise to you.
No, I think he's done a great job. You know, when I had the game at Kansas State in T-Mobile Center, right there, like, you know, they jump off that 20-point lead. And I told my play-by-play partner, Mark Neely, who's a Big 12 guy, in Kansas City, I said, because I had seen Kansas State in the Paradise Jam. I had covered 3 of their games over there. Illinois State was there representing the Valley. Kansas State was there. And I told Mark Neely, I said, be ready, Mark, because this Kansas State team is going to have their hands full with Drake today. And he kind of, come on, I'm a Big 12 guy. I said, no, this team's really good. I got all the pieces. And where do you see Bennett Sturtz play? And certainly they got up 20. Mascari hit 8 threes in that game. It was an eye-opening experience, I think, for everyone except me, who knew what was coming from this Drake Bulldog team.
All right. I think it's a perfect spot to kind of pause on the Drake basketball talk and then touch on a thing you brought up is you always are down in the US Virgin Islands Paradise Jam. So you're seeing a ton of basketball throughout the year, not only just in the Valley, but then while you're down there, you see Kansas State. So you're seeing some of these other programs. Yeah. And you're working with different play-by-play broadcasters along the way. First off, how awesome is that gig down? You spend a week and a half or 2. Do you do the women's bracket as well?
Yeah, I got to tell you, Mike, I learned this is I think it's now my 11th year. And about 5 years ago, they asked me, can you stay and do the women's? Because, you know, it's so expensive to fly in someone else just for those games. So, and I learned you better go in about 5 or 6 days early to enjoy the islands. And my girlfriend Madonna now goes with me. We actually went in on Saturday this year. The games don't start until that Friday. And we went over to the U.S., to the British Virgin Islands for the first time. So every year we go down there, we plan a little extra trip. But Michael, as you know, once it starts, and you know, Brad Wells goes with me. You know, Brad, who's now he had your game just Wednesday night with UIC, good friend of mine. So he's been going with me, and he basically carries me because Brad is an outstanding play-by-play guy. But once it starts, we're in Thursday's practice. We're in there 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. at night. And then the games start the next day. We're doing 4 games in a row. So you're basically taking one file and tossing it and grabbing another file. You got 25 minutes on the clock. You got to get your intros, run the bathroom, shove a little food in, and then you go at it again. And the women, you actually do 4 games. We're doing 12 games in 3 days. So you're on air constantly. That's why I learned go in about a week early and enjoy the islands and get refreshed, because once it starts, it is a brutal schedule, and you're just kind of running on adrenaline. And I always say I should have 5-Hour Energy be the sponsor for that tournament, because about game number 3 of game number 2, you need a little pep me up.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, you got it down. You've got it down mastered, though. You get in before, get to enjoy it is such a beautiful area down there. And then, you're in that kind of tiny gym.
You were down there, Michael, because remember Drake won it in about 2 or 3 years ago. Drake was the champ down there. And then Missouri State won it, I think, 2 years ago. Might have been Darren DeVries' team 3 years ago that won that tournament.
Yeah, I think we were there the first time after the hurricanes.
Yes.
So it had kind of reopened, and they put us in the Ritz-Carlton down there, which I do not.
Oh, that's right. I remember Darren DeVries told me about that. Ritz-Carlton.
That was something else.
Well, that's where we left on our catamaran cruise to the British Virgin Islands. We left out of that hotel area, but all the teams now are back in that beautiful. It's the Westin. It took them 5 years to rebuild it, but we're always jealous of you radio guys, because you're doing 1 game a day, 3 games, and you're out there. We're doing 24 broadcasts in 9 days, so it is it's a lot of fun, and I wouldn't give it up for the world.
There are some bright spots about doing the radio gig. One thing I wanted to ask you about is, you're talking about working with Brad Wells. You worked a lot this year, and a lot of our games have been with Clay Matvick, who is another fantastic play-by-play broadcaster. You mentioned Mark Neely, who was a guy early on in my career, kind of got me my first job, helped kind of point me in the direction of my first job down at KOAM TV in the Pittsburgh Joplin market. So, you get to work with some really great play-by-play guys. What makes that chemistry work, especially, when you get to work with Clay and Brad so often?
Well, I think you got to have a friendship with him. And Clay's going to pick me up at 6:00 tonight, as he's coming from Minneapolis, out on I-380. I'm in the North Liberty area, and we're gonna drive to Peoria. And we'll spend some time together, go out to dinner tonight, and then get up and do that game tomorrow. And we're hopping that vehicle, and we'll be blowing up to Cedar Falls to get there late tomorrow night and up for an 8 a.m. shoot around with the Drake Bulldogs. So you spend a lot of time with them. And, I spent a lot of time, like after the Drake Bradley game last week, went back to the hotel. Clay had his family down. He's got 3 great children, his wife. We hung out at the pool. And so those types of things really bring it together. And Brad Wells brings his wife to the Virgin Islands, Molly, my girlfriend Madonna. So we all go out to dinner, spend a lot of time together. So I think the chemistry that you have with that play-by-play person, as you know, Michael, you're in the business too, that is so important. And the timing of when you're speaking and you kind of know the other person's cadence, that makes for a really smooth broadcast. And Clay and I have a real good chemistry together, along with, Brad Wells and John Rooney I've worked with. He's one of the, great voices in the business. Scott Warman, you go right down the list. The Valley has such outstanding play-by-play men in the and for you new fans for the Drake Bulldogs, you get watch Arch Madness, you're going to see a bunch of them. Coach Z, you had your game on Wednesday, is just outstanding analyst. So I would give great credit to Jack Watkins, who puts the TV package together for, he's got some really great personnel behind the microphones. And we also have it, throughout the league in the radio voices, Michael. One of the things I always do when I go to a game, like tomorrow, Bradley versus Murray, I'm going to talk to the Murray radio guys. I'll talk to the Bradley radio people. I always talk to you and Mike, because you guys have some inside information because you're around that team all the time. So any little nugget I can get that will add to that broadcast is what I'm seeking.
Well, you guys are always fun to talk to, and us as radio guys, we like to give you a little nugget along the way. So it's for us, it's sharing the story being a Drake guy. It's sharing the story of the Drake Bulldogs, and you guys do such a great job of that.
So we're trying to do is tell the story of the Missouri Valley Conference.
Exactly. And so you take each team and tell it as well as you possibly can, which then elevates the entire conference. All right, so windshield time with Clay Matvick. What's the conversation like?
Oh, I'm glad you got that, Michael, because he's an old DJ. He grew up in the radio business. And I think as a teenager in high school, he was spinning records at a station up somewhere in the Minneapolis area, and he's in St. Cloud. So our toughest trip was we had Southern Illinois. I think it was the Bulldogs down there, wasn't it, on a Saturday? And then we had to turn around and get back for a game at Northern Iowa. I think it was Bradley. It's all kind of a blur right now. So we were 7 hours down there, did the game, hopped in the car, and drove 7 hours, actually 8 hours back to Cedar Falls. So he pulled out the music trivia, the country western music trivia.
Ooh,
which
okay.
He's good at. Now, when he pulls out the history, because I'm an old U.S. history teacher, remember Caitlin Clark's mother, I kill him on the history stuff, but I can't keep up with him on music trivia. The guy is way too good.
Oh, that is awesome insight. Does that ever trickle into you guys, pull like a inside joke on air?
Oh, once in a while we'll drop one, but your audience wants to know what you're talking about. So how it is. Those inside jokes don't go too well. There's only 2 of you involved in it, so you got to be kind of careful of that. But I once in a while we'll give each other some on air. We'll give each other some gentle ribbing.
I appreciate all the insight on that. That's awesome stuff. Let's dive into Sunday's matchup. And first, I think we've got to start with what Northern Iowa has done since the last time these two teams got together. Leon Bond goes down with an injury. He is in the starting lineup all season. He's one of those guys that can just get you a bucket when you need one. He's a run stopper. He goes down with a season-ending injury. And then you're kind of like, all right, what's going to happen? First game, you wonder if, Coach Jake has this master plan that he's going to drop on the Bulldogs and, catch you by surprise. And then you never know what's going to happen after that. Well, it's kind of inverse. They use that game to 66-52 Bulldog win. They use that game to figure out something about themselves, and they have been nearly unstoppable since. What has gotten into these Panthers?
Well, Michael, I think if you look at the history of what Ben Jacobson has done at Northern Iowa, this is his 19th season. They're always a team that plays their best basketball late in the year. And you'll see them lose some games early in December, but he's in it for the long haul. And I think, Coach Mack kind of told me the same thing when I said to Coach Mack, I said, I looked at your record. Your first 2 years as head coach at Northwest Missouri State, you didn't have great success. What changed in year 3? And he had a great answer for me. He said, well, I no longer was concerned about the end. I was concerned about the process. So I focused on the process, and the end results takes care of themselves. I think it's the same thing that made Nick Saban so successful as a football coach. So when you talk about Northern Iowa, I think they're a little bit of the same type of mentality as let's keep getting better at the process, and the results will take care of themselves. But with Northern Iowa and Leon Bond, they were preparing him to guard point guards. And they did a little bit against, let me think, Southern Illinois and some other teams, Indiana State. So I'm thinking he's getting ready to guard Bennett Sturts for that Drake game. And then he went down with the injury. But I think what's happened with that team is the emergence of, and I think confidence in Ben Schweiger. He's got to step up more. He's come off a double-double against Belmont. He's had to be more of an aggressive player. And the confidence of Max Weisbrod coming off the bench, who's now our starter, gives him more three-point opportunities. And then just a little tweak in there, Michael, because you know how teams are. You can see it with Drake when Jackson gets hurt. There's some little tweaks there. Kel Combs comes on strong. Kel Schmidt off the knee injury, just even though he's playing 8 or 10 minutes a game, it takes Trey Campbell off the point and gives them more opportunities to score. So even that subtlety of 10 minutes a game out of Kel Schmidt, who is a really good defender, has also transformed this Northern Iowa team, I think, at the defensive end. And Trey Campbell, I think, is playing at an all-league level. Right now, I'd vote him on my second team for sure. And if it wasn't for Bennett Sturts, Titan Alexander would be my player of the year. I mean, he's trailing. Bennett's got that thing locked up as far as I see it, but Titan Anderson's playing at a high level.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Is there a path forward for Titan Anderson to take the Larry Bird Trophy out of Bennett's hands?
I don't think so. And look at what Bennett's done. He's leading the league in points, steals, assists, minutes played, assist-turnover ratio. I mean, those are astronomical numbers. And, what do you have, a 30-point, 10 assist game? You got to go back to Oscar Robinson to have numbers like that. It's just been outstanding. And the ball's in his hands, 70, 80% of the time. And he's making all. I mean, I've heard Emenecker make a great analogy of what's happening, or analyst work of Sturts is taking all the decisions out of the other players' hands. It's making it easier for them to play because he's making all the major decisions. And I always like to talk with Bennett Sturts about how he preps for a game, what he's looking for when he comes to those ball screens. And he's such a low-key, easygoing dude. It's he plays with no emotion, which I think is just outstanding, which is some of the other reasons why this Drake team's had so much success.
Yeah, he's been fantastic, and 500-plus points, 160-plus assists, only the 9th player in Missouri Valley Conference history to do that. All right, I want to go back to the Panthers and a couple of the guys that you brought up, and I think it's interesting that the top 2 teams in this conference, they've gotten a huge boost from guys that played at a lower quote-unquote level this season. With Weisbrod, he was the newcomer, or he was the player of the year in the GLIAC at Northern Michigan, which is a D2 program. Kel Schmidt played 4 seasons at Coe College. So those are 2 kind of X-factor guys that have helped the Panthers push into position for a championship.
Well, here's what you got to understand. I have a really good feeling of what basketball is like at Northwest Missouri State. I was the head coach at Nebraska Omaha when it was the old North Central Conference and a Division II conference with North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Northern Colorado was in the league at that time. It was a really, really good league, one of the top Division II leagues. And, of course, very similar to what the MEAC in Missouri that they're playing in. Really well-funded, excellent coaches. So I get a lot of calls from players saying, hey, I got a Division II player for you. And my answer would be, Division II players get me beat. I got to have Division I talent. And that's what we found out that Northwest Missouri State had, because that transition to Drake was so seamless for those players, Abreu, and just go right on down the line, how well they performed. So I understand that there's great players at every level. It's harder now today because recruiting, there's just no hidden gems anymore. And I think when I talk to Bennett Sturts, I always got to hesitate because I always want to call him Garrett Sturts. Have you ever done that on air?
I have not yet.
I did it once at the Kansas State. I knew I was going to leak out because Garrett Sturts, the all-time leading rebounder at Drake, but Bennett Sturts, yeah. So that transition to Division I basketball is, for those guys, wasn't that big of a difference, I don't think, because you got to have great players. And when I talked to him at the Kansas State game, going back to my original thought, was he was a little bit of a product of a COVID shutdown. So I think prior to his senior year, he didn't play a lot of AU basketball because a lot of that stuff was limited because of COVID. So I don't think he really had a lot of eyeballs on him in the recruiting circles, which there's a lot of players that fell through the cracks, 4 or 5 years ago because of that COVID shutdown. But in today's world, there just aren't a lot of secrets. Now, we do have this, as you know, Michael, guys that get better. And when I coached with Elder Miller at Northern Iowa, we always said, find me guys that have become better college players than they are high school players. And if you look down the list of Northern Iowa great players that I was able to recruit, some of those guys weren't heavily recruited, like Cam Johnson, Randy Blocker, you right down the list, Jason Reese, Maurice Newby. Those guys all became big-time players and have great professional careers afterwards, but they weren't highly recruited coming out of a high school.
Northern Iowa has where are they at now? 6 some consecutive wins, and coming off maybe their 2 most impressive wins of the year. And the fact of what they had to go through to get the wins. They go down to Murray State. A game is postponed a day because of floods in Western Kentucky. Then that game is moved into Nashville. So both teams hop on the bus, head to the Curb Event Center on the campus of Belmont. They play a game, and then Northern Iowa stays down in Nashville for a couple days, and then they're down 19 to Belmont and come from behind to win that game. And it sets up this game on Sunday, 1 versus 2. And we've talked about the development of the Panthers, talked about Coach Ben Jacobson and what he does with getting his teams to play so well at this time of year. And now they've got that little X factor thing of they have this resilience built up, and that turns into confidence. And that is equally as scary as all the other things.
Oh, no, yeah, no question. This time of year, you get in the second half of February, confidence is huge for your players. And that 19-point comeback, you've been to Belmont. You know how well they shoot in that gym. That was an amazing comeback, and obviously a huge confidence builder for this Northern Iowa team. And the first matchup of these teams, I thought Drake did an excellent job with a high ball screen. Northern Iowa tried to get a little cute, I thought, Michael, with their defense. They tried to play Hudson kind of back in the slot and drop coverage. Didn't work. He was kind of a man lost in space. They didn't guard Jackson, and Combs made him pay when they didn't guard him. I look for Northern Iowa. When you try to get cute like that, it kind of throws you off. So I look for a different game plan from Northern Iowa against Drake on this Sunday. But you still have to somehow find a way to defend the middle ball screen that Drake runs at you. And they're so good at that, whether it's Banks, who is front runner for me as the 6th man of the year, or it's Manyaw. Those guys are so good. Physical screens, their ability to read and react of what Bennett Sturts is going to do off there, and the other players on the perimeter, what they're doing for cuts. So Northern Iowa, I'm not sure how they're going to defend. I'm kind of anxious to go that shoot around Sunday to see what changes they make, because you got to be able to handle that high ball screen if you're going to be able to deal with Drake. And I love what Coach Mack says about you got to win in the margins. If you look at that last box score, which I've been going over here the last couple of days in my prep, Drake steals, points off, turnovers were huge. Their ability to get the free throw line, like I believe Northern Iowa only shot like 7 free throws in that game. They're a team that's been going to the free throw line a bunch. Titan Anderson shoots more free throws and made more free throws than anybody else in the Valley. That's got to somehow flip if Northern Iowa is going to have any success. And that's the difficult thing to do. The teams that have beaten Drake that I've covered, which was Murray State in the Knapp Center and Bradley, played really physical basketball with Drake. And that's what you have to do, I think, to be successful.
Well, that's where I was going to go with this, because in the post game after that first meeting, Titan Anderson and Ben Jacobson both were going back and forth about how, they just felt like Drake was the tougher team. I imagine that is going to be a major emphasis and a talking point this weekend. Is you got to be physical on those ball screens and blowing that up and being physical with Bennett Sturts and using some of that length and athleticism that Northern Iowa has to their advantage. You sense that as well?
Oh, no question. You watched Bradley's game plan. They kept changing up what they did with Bennett Sturts. They would put Duke Dean small, full court pressure on him, kind of wear into him. Then they would use Christian Davis, 6'7" length, travel the top of screens. AJ Ferguson did that for Murray State, trying to blow the top of the screens. Trey Campbell's not that physical defender, and I watched. He hit so many of Banks and Cameo's screens in that game in Des Moines that somehow he's got to find a way to get over it, because you can't go below the screen or you're really in trouble, because Bennett Sturts' ability to read that and react off of those types of things. But so they're going to have to change that coverage some way and get more physical about it. What Northern Iowa does, it causes people problems. They'll invert their post players, which means they'll take their big guy, they'll put Titan Anderson on the block and take Jacob Hudson, and put him at the 3-point line. And they'll, what we call an invert, and they'll post up Anderson. Hopefully they're trying to pull the bigs of Drake away from the basket. We'll see if they go to that strategy here this Sunday.
Yeah, Indiana State did that a little bit against the Bulldogs at the Knapp Center. As we wind down our time here on the Hometown Hoops podcast, Kevin, you're a little bit closer to Cedar Falls than we are here in Des Moines. What kind of pulse do you have on this fan base that felt like they had kind of been had like one eye on the team all season, and now with this run, I imagine the McLeod Center is going to be bumping on Sunday. Well, yeah, what's your pulse of what's happening around there?
Well, they had the Bradley game up there a couple of weeks ago where they had the hot tubs in the end zone behind the basket. Big promotion. Everybody had out the tropical shirts. But that was the first Saturday weekend that the students were back on campus. So they're back now. So I would look for a big turnout from the student body on this game, because, as you know, Michael, it's an in-state rivalry. There's a lot at stake, and I knew they're going to have a huge crowd at the Knapp Center when they played down there, because the biggest amount of alumni base for Northern Iowa lives in the Des Moines area. So they come out to watch that team, and of course the Drake fans are really catching on to how good this team is too. I think that attendance in the Valley has been phenomenal, and I got to give kudos to the AD, Brian Harden, the president at Drake, Marty Martin, because I grew up in Des Moines when I was teaching there, when back in the days of in the early 80s, when they had some really great teams playing. Krecklos were playing, and what I did in the off time, I was still young and had a little left in my legs there, so I played a lot of pickup games with ex-Drake players like Lewis Lloyd and Pop Wright and Ron Angel. Those guys, a lot of those guys became good friends of mine, and we would play a lot at the Dowling Auxiliary Gym or down Townsend Engineering. So I grew up in that area where they played the old vets, and then watched the downtime in the 90s when they really struggled. And then I think Brian Harden came in and you knew President Marty Martin, and really put an emphasis on, hey, basketball can be the front porch of this Drake University program and get it on a national scale. So they've done a great job of game atmosphere, putting money into the Shivers Complex is outstanding, new lighting, new scoreboards, and they're still doing, I think the upper deck's going to be redone at the Knapp Center too. So it's really they've done a great job making that a fan friendly and fan fun experience.
No doubt about it. I appreciate you pointing that out. I don't think those two guys get enough of the credit for what has happened on this campus. So thanks for that, Kevin. All right, final thing, 1 versus 2. It's the latest. Drake and Northern Iowa have been in this position heading into the final 3 games of the season. First place is on the line. Drake could clinch at least a share of the championship, something that they did, as you pointed out earlier in this conversation, back in 2008. You're an Iowa guy. I think the state would lose its mind if this was like Iowa State and Iowa, but it is Drake. It is Northern Iowa. How fired up are you just to be on the in the position to be on the call for a game like this?
Well, you know, you're behind the mic too. It's so exciting, and the bigger the build up, the more exciting it is, and just to get ready for that game and the prep, and you're trying to get ready for everything you think is going to happen. Because in my business as an analyst, like, you want to be the first guesser. You want to try to tell the audience, hey, here's what to look for. Here's what I think they're going to do. Because what they did, you just saw. So I always like to be kind of the first guesser in those situations. And when things are successful, hey, here's what they're doing to make this run. Here's what Drake is doing defensively. Here's what Northern Iowa is doing defensively. So, but the atmosphere is, as you know, what makes these things so fun to broadcast when the crowd noise is behind you. And I'll give you a little hint about Clay Matvick. On our sounds, we can turn up the inside of the arena, so you can turn that completely off so you don't hear anything. He likes that thing they call the gnat. He likes that thing turned up in his ears because he wants to be involved with the environment in that atmosphere. He loves what we call the high gnat. So he's got sound coming through his ears of what the fan base is doing. So I'm getting pumped, Michael. Just talk to you about this game coming up.
It's awesome, and thank you for helping us set the stage here on the Hometown Hoops podcast. Because I know I'm fired up. Watched a little bit of practice this morning. Team's ready to go, and our fan base is excited. And I imagine there'll be some blue up in Cedar Falls.
No question. And welcome. You said a lot of new fans that were fans of Coach Max down in Missouri area. Welcome to this game, and it's a national stage too because it's an ESPN2 broadcast. So it's another great window of opportunity for the Valley to show the rest of the world how great basketball is in this league. Because, we're fighting for it, Michael. Every year we get back to multiple bids is what this league needs, because it's good enough that we have a number of teams, Drake, Northern Iowa, Bradley, that can win games in March in the NCAA tournament if given the opportunity to do it.
And if people, scoff at the Missouri Valley Conference, then keep your hands off of our players and coaches, because
that's a good one.
Everybody this time of year is like, those players are, it's the Valley. It's not that good or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then in March, they're saying that, but in April, they have a different tone about themselves.
Yeah, that's a good point, Michael. I don't know where our college basketball or sports in general, college sports is heading, but hopefully we get some guardrails up there and we won't have so much movement. And because I know what makes the Valley great, I think the best teams, and you've got when they're at Drake, is old teams that are experienced teams, and they're a little bit of an anomaly because even though they haven't played together at Drake, they played together for a long period of time, for those players. And I think that is really the best teams in the Valley are old and experienced and have played with one another for a long time.
Kevin, I thank you so much for your time. Before you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, just how you feeling, how you doing? I know you had quite the courageous battle with cancer. You beat it, and you stayed on the mic the whole way, which was incredible to watch. How you feeling these days?
Well, great. I thank you for asking, because Sunday, another reason I'm excited is my 2-year anniversary. February 23rd, 2023 is when I rang the bell, which ended my chemo and radiation treatment. So that's a big marker in the life of a cancer survivor, because once you get 2 years out, the chance of that cancer staying in remission goes up enormously. So I'll be celebrating Sunday. Whether the Bulldogs win or the Panthers win, I'll be celebrating some other things too. So I really appreciate you asking. You go back to Mark Neely. When I came out publicly on air, it was an Iowa versus Georgia Tech game, ACC Big Ten Challenge. Mark was my partner, and that's the first time I came out publicly because my hair had all fallen out. I just got my 4th chemo treatment, and they asked me to talk about it on air because it was Jimmy V week. And I tell you what, Mark Neely, I've become real close because I couldn't have got through that 2-minute timeout of talking about my journey without Mark putting his arm around me, help me through it, because it was an emotional time for me. And you talk about your camaraderie and with your play-by-play guy. Mark and I have become dear friends since that episode just about 1.5 years ago.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for sharing the journey along the way for us. And then, man, How about that? Sunday, 2 years.
Yeah.
That's something special. Congratulations, man.
I appreciate it, Michael. I appreciate all the support. I've got support from the Valley family, from everybody in the basketball world, and it's a kind of a blur, everything I went through, but I'm glad to be here. And as Madonna, my girlfriend, says, you're still eating ice cream, so I'll be eating ice cream Sunday, calling that game for the Bulldogs and the Panthers.
Let's go. I'll give you a big hug when I see you in person.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. I'm going to come over and get some nuggets from you and Mike.
You got it.
In practice, but I don't share it till the game starts.
No, I got you. Thanks for your time, man. Always a pleasure. Have fun on your road trip with Clay as well.
All right, Michael. We'll see you up there Sunday morning.